Eagles Entertainment.
The journey to the draft is driven by AAA. AAA, roadside is their strong side. Make AAA a part of your game day today. AAA, go ahead.
With the 25th pick in the NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select.
You're listening to the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA.
Welcome to the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA. I'm your host, Fran Duffy, and we've got another really fun show for you here today. We're going to talk about some draft day surprises, potentially, when we get to late April, and we'll also get a little preview in, and we're going to jump right in to the top. Draft Buzz, Ben Fennell, Dane Brugler, and I, we're going to chat about some of the shocking disparities that you may see in draft rooms all across the NFL at this stage of the process after some reports that we've gotten over the last week or so. We'll also do a little bit of a deep dive into the defensive tackle position. Not the deepest group overall this year, but some quality players that we will hit on right at the top of the show. After that, we've got On the Clock, where Ben, Dane, and I play GM for 3 different teams, and for each of these selections, each of us are going to be playing GM. The other 2 are going to be playing the roles of the scouting staff and the coaching staff. We added that twist last week, got some good feedback, so we're going to go round 2 with it here again today. Afterwards, the blueprint. This week, I chat with Zach Hicks, who covers the Indianapolis Colts for SB Nation. He's done some really insightful pieces on the types of players that general manager Chris Ballard has targeted during his time in Indy. So when you're putting together your mock draft, he's going to give you some good advice there on the Colts and what they are looking for. And then we'll wrap it up with Draft Mailbag. We've got a fan mock draft to get through, which, by the way, that is the last question in our queue. So if you've got a question, all you have to do is jump on Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating. If you leave your question in that comment section, we will get to it right here on the show. And it doesn't need to be a question. You can ask us about a player. That'd be great. But you might have your own set of rankings you want us to break down. You might have a mock draft you want us to break down. Maybe you've got a question just about player evaluation in general. Whatever it is, you can jump onto our Apple Podcast page, leave us a rating, leave us a comment. It's the best way to throw us your support as we're putting out a couple podcasts every single week. It helps keep that podcast up, higher and higher in the rankings, and makes it more visible to other people that are looking for podcasts about the NFL Draft. Appreciate everybody that has done that in recent weeks. That being said, let's get this show rolling. It's time now for Dane Brugler, Ben Fennell, and Draft Buzz.
Now it's time for Draft Buzz.
All right, guys, let's jump right in here with Draft Buzz as I welcome in Dane Brugler and Ben Fennell. Guys, the report that I wanted to respond to at the very top here is an interesting one, and it captured a lot of headlines late last week, and that was the reaction of multiple reports. Our friend Eric Galko with Optimum Scouting had put out, and a couple other people kind of bounced off that, was that a lot of teams, or multiple teams, I should say, do not have Trevor Lawrence as the number 1 quarterback. And I don't want to necessarily talk about that report specifically, because to me, it's really interesting that there was so much blowback on that from oh my God, I can't believe that people have differing opinions on these prospects, because this is around the time when coaches become more involved. They're all going to have thoughts. Individual scouts, the area scouts, they're going to have their own thoughts. High level executives, the directors of player personnel, the college directors, the VPs of personnel, they're going to have their thoughts. General managers, they're going to have their thoughts. So when you factor in all these different opinions, not everybody is going to see all these players the same way. So, Dane, I guess just when it comes to all of these kinds of reports, what kind of goes through your mind? Well, is that kind of how you view it as well?
Yeah, and it's tough because at this point, teams really don't have draft boards physically
exactly
yet.
Yep.
It's just opinions of people around the league, and so I mean, most of the time, I think it's chum in the waters. I think part of the time, these reports have no merit because, again, it's just opinions throughout the league. It's not like the teams have their draft boards built and there's one quarterback at the top and it's not Trevor Lawrence. Like, it's not how things actually are. So, I think once the calendar turns to February, we really start to hear the misinformation and a lot of the differing opinions, and it's people get so locked in on a certain way of thinking. It happened with Justin Fields coming into this year. He was the number 2 quarterback, and that was it. There's no room for anybody else to think anything different. And then Zach Wilson emerges, and a lot of people had a hard time, thinking that anybody but Justin Fields could be that number 2 quarterback. And I think you want to stay open-minded to the possibility of a team thinking that Zach Wilson or somebody else is above Trevor Lawrence. But, at this point in the season, I think it's more just varying opinions around the league. And, I think it's more noise than it is a lot of truths mixed in there.
And Ben, honestly, it's one of the things that I love about doing this podcast with you guys. The three of us have been talking every single week for the last 8 months now about all of these players, and we'll talk whether it's here in this show or offline. All three of us have differing opinions on all these players. And so, if Dane is talking to a reporter and I'm talking to a reporter and you're talking to a reporter, you might say, oh yeah, I like him more than our head coach does. I like him more than our general manager does. People run with that kind of stuff. And it kind of just speaks to the fact that more of the human element of this entire process.
Yeah. And I like hearing outlier takes and, maybe differing opinions. And that's part of this process. And it's healthy to have those conversations. It's how we react to those conversations, which I think we need to look in the mirror for more. We don't need to be so emotional or dramatic about scouts maybe questioning a prospect, or, it's also the news media side of it, in that Trevor Lawrence has been the consensus number one pick for the 2021 draft for about 2.5 years now. If I say Trevor Lawrence is the number one overall pick, that's not an exciting headline. So there's a bit of the sensationalism around headlines as well, too, to say everybody's going one direction, this article went the other. Which one's going to get picked up? The one going the other. And that's kind of the clickbait world of, headlines and takes and opinions that we live in.
So what I was kind of thinking, just coming off of this discussion, was I feel like a lot of people would be surprised at how many of those opinions there actually are, right? Because not all 32 teams aren't going to look at all these players and say, yep, this is our set order, guys. We agree with how Daniel Jeremiah sees it, or how Todd McShay sees it, or how Dane Brugler or Ben Fennell see it. We see it our way. So what I was kind of thinking was, all right, let's each of us kind of contribute a scenario or two where, it could be, I like Zach Wilson more than Trevor Lawrence. He's my number one quarterback. To me, one good example of that would be looking at this wide receiver group, right, for this upcoming draft. A lot of people, the debate for a lot of people is Jamar Chase versus Devontae Smith. I think a lot of people would be surprised if you said, oh, well, actually, I like Jalen Waddle as the number one receiver, or as the number two receiver ahead of Devontae Smith, the guy who just won the Heisman Trophy. I think a lot of people would be surprised by that. By the way, you shouldn't be surprised by that. I think that there are a lot of smart people kind of have that opinion that, Jalen Waddle might be the better pro prospect. He might have, the better pro career when we're sitting here 10 years from now.
And another conversation that's starting to gain buzz is really the press cornerback conversation, where we had Patrick Surtain kind of as the incumbent number one cornerback throughout most of the season. And now we're suddenly seeing, is Caleb Farley potentially the first one? Is J.C. Horn maybe a better value prospect over Surtain? So this is that muddying of the waters time where you're starting to re-reflect on their entire body of work, stack your board and project your board as well. And everyone's board is going to be a little bit different. And having differing opinions is why you pay all these different scouts to be in one room. If everybody was just a yes man and trying to get on the same page, that's typically, bad business as well. So I love having some maybe tough conversations at times, but I call them healthy conversations.
Yep. Dane, is there one of those scenarios that you kind of see as one that maybe people would be surprised by?
Well, cornerback was what I wrote down, like what Ben said.
Yep.
I mean, to me, Caleb Farley's been the top corner all year, and then Patrick Surtain right behind him. But if someone else has J.C. Horn as their top corner in this draft, it's not the craziest thing. It's not like there's no way that could happen. It's just nonsense. I mean, it's something that you could certainly understand if someone came away watching the Auburn tape and a couple other tapes and thinking, okay, give me J.C. Horn with what he can do. I think he can play man. I think he can play zone. He's not scheme specific. He can do a lot of different things. And so if a team came away thinking Horn's our guy, that to me, that's not crazy. And really, I think you go position by position. Hey, you're a linebacker. If a team had a specific need for that Sam role and they look at Zaven Collins and what he can offer, is that crazy to think they draft him over Parsons or Owusu Koromoa? Not necessarily. I think that's certainly in the realm of possibility. So, based off of what teams are looking for, play personality wise, scheme fit wise, definitely see some of these, quote unquote consensus, third or fourth in the rankings of their positions, maybe be at the top of a list for a certain team.
And Fran, it's not really even just for stacking and big boards, because this is going to go right into the selection process. Reflecting back on last year, it feels like the Henry Ruggs going ahead of, CeeDee Lambs and Judy's in the first round stacking that made everybody kind of say, whoa, I didn't really see that coming. So while they're all first round receivers, how they go off the board is obviously going to vary.
Can I throw a couple names at you too, guys? Because to me, like with this year, with all the different opt-outs and the guys that are coming into the NFL with such small sample sizes, I feel like there's going to be even more variance than normal. Like a player like Walker Little, right? We've talked about him as kind of a wild card in this class. I'm going to be honest, guys, like going back and watching that 2019 game, well, again, one game a year and change ago against Northwestern, an out-of-conference opponent, he looked like a first-round pick in that game. In my opinion, I watched him and I said, this guy looks absolutely legit in this one game. It was 16 months ago, right? So everybody's going to weigh that differently, and everybody's going to have different information, and everybody's going to say, oh, well, I know the guy that he's working out with, or I know this, or I know the offensive line coach there at Stanford. That's where that stuff's going to go. But just going off that film, if you said Walker Little's going to be a surprise first-round pick, he's going to go in the 20s in this draft, I wouldn't say like, oh, that's a huge surprise to me, but I think that would be the headline of draft night would be wow, that was a surprise there with Walker Little going in the first round.
Yeah, and who's the Washington tackle that went in the first round 2 years ago to Atlanta?
Caleb McGarry.
Yeah, exactly. Like I don't think we weren't talking about that as a big possibility. I mean, we know these tackles get pushed up, and with the circumstances around Walker Little. Yeah, that could certainly be the case. Another name at tackle I'd throw out there is James Hudson at Cincinnati, who, a different journey than Walker Little, but similar in terms of you wish there was more of a sample size. And we've seen him more recently, but, he basically has, not even one full season at tackle, but the traits are really, really intriguing. If you told me that he ends up in the first round, I wouldn't be shocked. I would understand it because the traits are first round worthy. So yeah, I think there's definitely a few of those types of players where teams might ultimately be higher. And if they get convinced that, it's not that much of a risk, they might try to capitalize on those traits.
Every single year, there are players that go higher than everybody in the media expects and players that go lower. And it's because of these kinds of things. It's just that we get so shocked, and there's like that shock factor in February and March and April leading up to it that, maybe it gets kind of glossed over. But that there's a reason why those kinds of things happen. But I was glad that we were able to kind of churn through a couple potential scenarios for where that could happen here this spring. Guys, before we get into our defensive tackle preview, we like doing our film room recap. Just a guy that we have each watched over the last week or so that we wanted to kind of bring to the table. Ben, I'll come to you first with this one. Is there a guy that you've studied lately that has kind of caught your eye?
Well, I've been trying to clean up my edge rushing pecking order. So I finished up Miami edge rusher Jalen Phillips. And I said over the weekend, after watching all of his tape and doing his report, I think he's the most advanced and well-rounded pass rushing prospect in this class. And now everyone's going through the Rolodex. Listen, Ojolari, he's looser. Kwity Paye is more explosive. Rousseau is longer. Basham is stronger. Shaka Tony's got a better step. Oweh's got more upside and traits. But collectively, the full body of work, Jalen Phillips, I think, checks all the boxes and has the best, most well-rounded traits and upside, in my opinion. He's 6'5", just a shade under 260. He has the size, the length, the strength, the speed, the awareness, the motor, and some technical usage in getting after quarterbacks. So I love his pass rush plan. He can win a variety of ways. He can win high side, bending and flattening the corner, has the speed of power, has spin moves, counter moves. His awareness is outstanding, guys. Rarely behind the quarterback. Loves to get to the quarterback's depth and either retrace or flatten. That keeps him alive in plays. Has some 3-tech alignments with Quincy Roche over there. A lot of stunts in games. Active, violent hands, can change directions, as we've seen him as the unblocked guy, as whether he's an option player or trying to make jet sweeps and some end-around plays where he has to really change directions. He checks a lot of boxes. The biggest concern for Phillips, remember, the former number 1 overall player out of high school, went to UCLA, retired from the game, came back to the University of Miami, has the concussions, has some off the field interests and things to maybe vet through as well, and figuring out his, interest in football and just being a professional. But his tape is really, really interesting. And he's a productive player and checks a lot of boxes. And looking at a guy that's 6'5", 258, that's right in the size and the mold we want out of our edge rushers that can survive on early downs and some sub-package looks. So Jalen Phillips is an interesting player, and I'd be shocked if he made it out of the first round.
I mean, he is a guy that goes back to the early part of the conversation where I feel there's going to be people that are all over on him, right? There are going to be some people that view him as a first round player and what he can be. You look at his ceiling and say, look, he hasn't played a ton of football at the collegiate level. This was really the only year where he was a full-time starter. Everything else, he was kind of a spot player early in his career for UCLA. And you mentioned the other stuff that you're kind of worrying about with him, but just looking at the on field, say, man, like this guy could be everything we're looking for off the edge, but there are some people that I'm sure Dane maybe have him off the board.
I've literally had scouts tell me he won't be on the board for us. And, that might be a little premature when they haven't gotten to the medical portion of the process yet. But, he said it pretty matter-of-factly that, wasn't going to be on the board for us. And, that he's got a lot of baggage. But, I mean, I agree with, a lot of what Ben said. If you told me that, he was a cousin of the Bosa's, I'd believe it. When you look at some of the similar ways they win in terms of using their hands and their pass rush construction, not quite as dynamic as the Bosa's, but they have some similar movements. And so I'm Phillips as a talent, easy to get on board. Really, really talented player. The baggage is obviously going to be something that, especially for those of us on the outside, trying to figure out what to do with that, it's just going to make it really difficult.
And Dane and Fran, really fast, in all sincerity, he could retire tomorrow. He could play for 15 years. I have no idea. And that's kind of the gray area of the limitations of the tape, limitations of not being, privy to medical records and things like that and personal interviews. So just as much as I'm talking him up and crushing on him, and I like him, he could retire tomorrow. He could be a Hall of Famer. That's how all over the place certain, prospects are in this class, particularly the ones with some medical and some off the field concerns.
You have to wonder with this abbreviated process, how that's going to affect a player like that, because, without having scouts on campus during the fall and without having, he wasn't a guy at the Senior Bowl. This is a lot of teams, they learn about these guys with these issues on those 30 visits, the facility visits. Those aren't happening this spring, or they'll take him out to dinner before his pro day. That's not going to happen. So there's a lot of the steps that are missing that teams usually rely on to get a better sense of the person and not just the player. And so you have to wonder in a process that's abbreviated like this, what that means for a guy like Phillips.
It feels like the NBA taking kids out of high school. The bust rate is going to be that much greater. The variance and the hit rate is going to be that much greater.
Well, either that or they decide there's too much risk involved.
We're not even going to pull the trigger here, yeah.
Right. And that's I could see it going either way, where, teams will say, you know what, we'll take the chance. There's too much talent there. Or other teams are going to be like, we'll let someone else take that chance. We'll go with someone we feel more comfortable about.
I talked about this last week here on this show, but I actually caught up with former NFL scout Dan Hatman last week on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, and we talked about this pre-draft process, what it's like for scouts, how that could impact the selection process when we get to late April. And he said, talking about those kinds of players, the guys that have the off-field stuff, that have the medical stuff, they could fall a little bit further than you would expect this year, because teams might just say, hey, look, if we've got these guys and they're kind of similar, we're going to go with the other guy that we feel a little bit more certain about, just because this year we don't have enough face time. There's not enough exposures for us to feel extra confident about that kind of scenario.
And really quick, Fran, I love the point Dan made, that saying, well, how do you survive with the limited tape? Hey, listen, the pro scouts got to make full reports on 9 preseason snaps sometimes. Right. So we're used to having limited tapes and having to do a full picture. So I just love that sentiment of minimal tape. That's okay. We're used to that.
We can figure out a way to get through that. Dane, I want to come to you for your film and recap, but I want to real quick, just because I feel like this player for me is almost off the same vein as Jalen Phillips, and that's Kelvin Joseph. Dane, you talked about him last week. I got to his film late in the week last week. I mean, he's 6'1", just under 200 pounds. He's everything you look for in a corner this way. When you look from a physical standpoint, he's long, he's athletic, he can turn and run. The way that he was able to defend Devontae Smith downfield numerous times was really impressive. He can play the ball in the air really, really well. He flashes as a run player, but more importantly, just in coverage, he gives you that lockdown ability in a 6'1", 200-pound frame. I mean, that's what teams are looking for. But he started at LSU. All the off-field stuff that you talked about last week, I don't even need to rehash it, but I think that he's another guy that, again, if someone said, hey, we view him as a top 3 corner in this class, I'm not going to sit here and say that's crazy. And if you said, hey, he's off our board, that's not crazy either. And all 32 teams are going to have 32 differing opinions on that.
Yeah, the baggage it's hard to know what to do with it. And on the field, I mean, yeah, he'll give up a play here and there, but the body of work's really impressive. And so I'm not sure what to do with them. And another guy that falls in that category of, there's going to be limited amount or limited chances for teams to really get to know him. There's only so much you can learn virtually, without spending time around him and things like that. And so if you think that, a guy like Kelvin Joseph is on the same tier as a Greg Newsome or an Eric Stokes or some of these other guys that maybe you don't have some of those questions, all of a sudden maybe Kelvin Joseph, instead of being the third corner, is the seventh quarter drafted. It's just really interesting.
Dane, who's your guy here?
Justin Hilliard. I finished as Ohio State linebackers, and Hilliard, I mean, how do you not root for this guy when you just factor in how much he's been through with his injuries? He was, you think of Ohio State cleaning up in their recruiting. He was Ohio State's only 5-star that year in 2015 when he signed with the Buckeyes. And he was supposed to be the guy 3 years and out. Instead, he ends up spending double the amount of time in Columbus, 6 years. And mostly because of the injuries. Tore his biceps 3 different times. His right twice, his left once. Had a meniscus tear, an Achilles, ruptured Achilles in 2019. It adds up. And so ultimately, the medicals are going to determine where or if he's drafted. But just watching him against Northwestern, watching him on the Clemson tape, this guy he plays with so much twitch. His read reacts outstanding. He really played at a high level this past year as a senior when he was able to get on the field. So, the medicals, again, that's the key. But just as a talent, unquestionably an NFL talent. And so when you think about the determination, the adversity that he's been able to overcome, he's tailor-made for an NFL locker room. So hopefully the medicals check out well enough where he's able to get drafted and, kind of make his way in an NFL training camp.
Ben, how many special team snaps?
It was over 700. It was the highest I've ever seen. It was like 740 something. But it's also wild to go back and look at that 2015 recruiting class. I mean, he came in with Joe Burrow. He came in with Denzel Ward, who just finished his 3rd year in the NFL.
Crazy.
So this is definitely a veteran guy, a little bit of an older guy. Should be ready to go as far as body and strength.
All right, let's get to this defensive tackle position, guys, because, I said this earlier at the top. It's not the deepest group of defensive tackles. I remember 2 years ago, the 2019 draft was loaded at D tackle. It was deep. It was top heavy. There was a ton of talent. Last year, you had the guys at the top. You had Kinlaw, you had Derek Brown, but it wasn't a super, super deep group. And then this year, I feel like even a little bit more of a drop off. We don't have that blue chipper that's definitely going to go top 10, top 15, and the overall depth, not quite what you would want. But that being said, I feel like day 2, there are a lot of really quality players. And, when you get to round 2, round 3, round 4, where I'm like, this guy's going to come in and play in the league. So I feel like this is going to be really an interesting conversation. And the first question I've got for you guys, Dane, you can kick us off. The best pure pass rusher from the defensive tackle position. Who do you see it in this class and why?
I'm going with Christian Barmore, who I think most of us believe will be their first defensive tackle drafted. He's powerful in his hands, so he can create that natural or that immediate knockback and kind of create his own passing lanes. He's just or pass rush lanes. He's a guy that just doesn't stay blocked very long, and so that helps him put pressure on the pocket. There are definitely raw elements to his game in terms of setting up his pass rush moves and being more efficient. But if you want a guy that's just going to be able to be disruptive and get to the backfield and disrupt the passing game, Barmore can do it just because he does not like to stay blocked and he's able to get off those blocks and make plays. So I'm going with Barmore.
I feel like Barmore has the highest upside of the D tackles in this class because he's got the ability to win in so many ways. He's got some initial power. He can win with technique. He can win with quickness off the ball. So, he's got a nice arm over move. He's got a violent club rip move. He's got a double hand swipe. He's got a couple different tools in his bag to be able to win. You just like to see it more consistently. That was my big thing with him getting after the quarterback. For me, I went with a guy that we have not seen. We haven't really talked about, and that's Pitt defensive tackle Jalen Twyman. He opted out of this past year. Pitt's defense still had a lot of success. They sent 2 guys to the Senior Bowl along the defensive line, and Rashad Weaver and Patrick Jones. But Jalen Schweinman, we talk about the twitch, the ability to get off the ball in the first step and all that stuff. That stuff's all good. What stood out to me about Jalen Twyman, I thought his block recognition skills were really, really good. And going back and having an understanding of, hey, they're sliding towards me or they're sliding away. So I'm man to man with this guard and I'm lined up, on his inside shade. So he's going to have to kind of underset. I can sell outside and then break back in. Just having an understanding of how to attack the guy across from him. I thought he showed some advancements as a pass rusher that really stood out to me. And he could string multiple moves together at times. He was really good on stunts and twists as well, but he could win one-on-one. Really good athlete. To me, it's Jalen Twyman. A little bit undersized at 6'2", listed 6'2", 290 when he was last with the Panthers. But this is a guy who in 16 starts put up 11 sacks. And I'm a big fan of Jalen Twyman. Kind of out of sight, out of mind player right now, but a really intriguing player nonetheless. Ben, who was your best pass rusher from the guys that you've seen so far?
Yeah, Twyman has a versatile skill set and a deep bag of tricks. And this guy is in a similar mold, and that's Osa Odigizua.
Yep.
And not so much in that he's this technical pass rushing, beast. It's just that he's so versatile and he's so multiple with the ways he can win. And I think down at the Senior Bowl, taking reps at 1 tech, 3 tech, standing up off the edge really just speaks to his ability to play up and down the line. Very much in the mold of like a Cam Hayward down there at Pittsburgh, who can play defensive end at any snap and he could be over the nose at any snap. I think he's that type of player that can win with swim moves. He can win with power and strength. And Fran, you obviously got all of our eyes with your highlight of his spin move at 3 tech. So he's got some looseness. He's got some ability to shoot up field. He can win with power. And then the ability to line up and down the defensive line. Never huge numbers as far as rushing the passer, but consistent across the board. And a lot of times had to do some run plugging first before he converted upfield, being that trench player. So he's a guy, I think a lot of his best football is ahead of him.
So let's go to our next category here, and that's the best run defender. I'll start things off. Ben, I'll come to you second. Dane, you round us out. To me, and I'm going to go with the guy that Dane had laid out as the best pass rusher. I'm going to go Christian Barmore. He is so strong on contact. Obviously, playing in that scheme for Nick Saban, you're going to have to be. You can't just be a pass rush specialist. You've got to be able to hold up at the point of attack. He's always square. He never gets his shoulders turned. He uses his hands well. He's violent on contact. I actually like him a little bit more. He's more consistent against the run right now than he is against the pass. That might be why, if he was more consistent against the pass, I think we're talking about a top 15 type of talent. But I think right now, with where he is in the run game, he's really, really intriguing to me as a guy that can line up inside. Really, he can play a number of different techniques. I mean, he played 3-4 DN in that scheme. He can come down and play 3. He can come down and play the nose. I think that Christian Barmore, to me, the best overall run defender in this class. And not just point of attack, but also backside, making plays of pursuit. I think he's got that in his bag as well. Ben, who was it for you?
Well, I'm going to go with a guy that also, had opted out of the 2020 season and has slimmed down to a trim 6'3", 350. Trimmed down to 350. And that's big Tyler Sheldon at LSU. Has had some weight problems out of high school, early in his career at LSU. But this is a massive run plugging nose tackle, absolute run plugger, stout at the point of attack, can stack and shed the centers, plays peekaboo really well. When he does want to shoot upfield, he can. He is a load. He is a train coming down the tracks. You cannot stop. Where you take him in the draft, I really don't know. He's had some rumblings of some Vince Wilfork. I think that's a little bit rich. I don't know where you should pluck this style of player in the draft. But if you're looking for a one-dimensional nose tackle, he's your guy. He is the one that's going to plug rush lanes, plug gaps, and never get moved off the ball. So he's an exciting player that I think is a little bit out of sight, out of mind, like a lot of the opt-outs have been.
I redid his tape last week as a refresher. He's really good. I mean, he is so stout.
And Fran, just to talk about that 2019 season, obviously LSU win the national championship. Dane Brugler mocked him 9th overall in his early 2021 mock draft, right after the 2020 draft. So certainly somebody that scouts and people we respect reviewing very highly.
That's. Go ahead. Well, I would say that when I was doing that, I think I've said this before, but I had a scout tell me that if he wants to be, he could be Vince Wilfork. And I mean, this scout was sky high on him and his ability, and the ability is there. I don't think it's an ability question. It's just, can he put it all together and, the want to really maximize all that talent. So he's a really interesting player to be sure.
And it's really fun. Really quick, Fran. I like to go back and watch some high school camp series every now and then. Guys in shorts and t-shirts doing one-on-ones. And he was in a really interesting summer class. He tore through Cesar Ruiz who was a first-round pick to the New Orleans Saints and a starting right guard in the NFL. So if you want to know just the caliber of player and the upside and the potential, he can hang with some NFL players.
To me, I think it is notable with Sheldon that he played in 2019 on that national championship season. A team that played however many games and was rarely playing from behind. They were always playing with the lead. Still finished the year with 0 sacks. So I think that the lack of pass rush impact, I do think is notable. Dane, who's yours here?
I'm going with Tommy Togiak, Ohio State. This guy, his ability to keep his shoulders square, torque his body, and take on single and double blocks, to discard them, find the football, just really, really impressive. He's got that upper body strength. He can stack those blocks and really find the ball carrier in the lane. So give me a guy like that who has not only the power, but the instincts. This is a guy that's not, like Sheldon, where he's 340 pounds and he's just a mammoth. He's 300 pounds. But you talk to people at Ohio State, they say he's easily the strongest guy we have in the program. So, he's built in the weight room. He was a guy that developed a passion for weightlifting when he was like a 10-year-old, and he's just been doing it ever since. And so he's got that developed core power. And, you see it. He needs to get better as a pass rusher. He's still kind of raw there, but he's not raw as a run defender. Developed power, physical hands, and the instincts that you really like to see for a player that, can find the football.
He is just a mound of muscle. Like, that's all that Tommy Togiak is. They call Doug Martin the muscle hamster. Like, that's kind of how Togiak is built. He's just all pure lean muscle. He's just a really, really strong player. All right, let's get to our next one here. Best technician. Ben, you'll go first. Dane, you'll go second. I'll round us out.
Well, I'm glad Dane, set up this ballpark here for Tommy Togiak, because I think he's the best technician for a lot of the things Dane said. Not the biggest, not the strongest, not the fastest, but so technically sound. Hands, location, consistent, almost every play. Pad level, consistent. Posture, consistent. Eye level up, consistent. Can play peekaboo, can stack and shed. Hustles, obviously, out to the numbers and down the field. Seems to do everything right technique-wise. And then, like you had mentioned, obviously that core strength, he brings a lot of brute strength with him, but he really uses a technically sound kind of game plan to get the job done. He never has plays that are like, whoa, and that's okay. He's just a down and dirty, doing his job type of run plugger with a little bit of pass rush upside because of his motor and effort. But that's okay that there aren't the wow flashes, because that's the type of player he is. He's just that hard hat, blue collar guy that's going to be technically sound on a down to down basis.
Dane, let's come back to you. Who's yours here? Your best technician.
It's probably stretching a little bit because I'll be honest, none of these guys really stood out to me. I mean, Togiak, that's a good one. Yep. I don't think any of these guys really stood out to me as being a brilliant technician. Who that's how they win. It's either quickness or power. I think that Lee McNeil, I thought he had better technique than I thought. And so that's why I'm going to choose him for here, because I went in because, he's a high school linebacker, moves to the defensive line. I was expecting a really raw player who was just more freaky than anything else. And, that's the case in a lot of his on his tape a lot, but I was impressed. I thought he played a little bit better than I thought in terms of not only is he resetting the line of scrimmage with his power, but it's the way he's using his hands. I mean, he's fighting with brass knuckles out there. And so it's not just power, but it's the way he's using his hands. He's striking with force, but it's also the placement. And he's using bent knees. So he's able to, use some of that leverage and low pads to anchor at the point of attack. So he was a more technically sound player than I thought. He's not, I wouldn't say it's necessarily the strength to his game, but I thought it was a little better of a trait for him than I thought going in.
Interesting. We're going to talk about McNeil here in a little bit. I'm going to bring him up for another category. So for me, I went with a guy that I feel like everybody was super, super high on coming into the year, right? Marvin Wilson from Florida State was in every single mock draft. He was in the top 10 of some, top 15 of some, top 20 of others. He was in everybody's mock. Then everything kind of fell down. And now I feel like, all right, I was the low man on him coming into the year. And now I'm like, all right, well, don't forget about Marvin Wilson now. I mean, he's a big, strong kid. He's got some power to him. There are athletic limitations to be sure, but this guy's really technically sound in my mind. And when I watch him as a pass rusher, he's not winning with quickness and burst, but I think the way that he wins, he's so good with his hands. He's changing up the pacing of his hands all the time. It's not like his hands are always going a million miles an hour. He's changing things up. And he also has a couple different moves. He can string things together. He's really violent when he puts his hands on you. So to me, I look at Marvin Wilson and see how he wins. I think he's got a pretty defined rush plan, and then he knows how to be able to use his hands to be able to win at the top of the rush. So I'm going to go with Marvin Wilson for my pick there as the best technician. Let's go with another one where this one was a tough one for me. Best motor, because there are a bunch of guys that really get after it in this group. Who's got the best motor for you, Dane?
I went with Levi Onwuzurike.
It's a great one.
Out of Washington, who, you don't necessarily see a ton of splash plays on his film because they played him at nose tackle. He's head up over the center, and he's taken on multiple blocks, and this really doesn't have that chance to create a lot of the flashy plays. But it's not for a lack of trying. I mean, this guy plays with ridiculous effort, snap in, snap out. Hustle. He's very active with his hands, very violent with his hands, doesn't take plays off. And a lot of times that helps him be productive in terms of, sniffing out screens or chasing from the backside, different things like that. So I think Onwuzurike, there's, some things that he needs to clean up in his game, but his effort is not one of them. It's definitely one of the strengths to what he does.
So for mine, I'm going to bring up a player that we've already talked about twice, and that's Tommy Togiak. To me, when you look even back to his interview that he did with me last week, right? I said, what's one play that best encapsulates your career that you would want fans or coaches or scouts to watch first? And he brought up 2 plays in pursuit, plays where he's chasing the ball down the field or outside the numbers. And I think that speaks to his play personality. So for best motor, I got to go Tommy Togiak just based off that alone. Ben, who was yours? There are a few options here left on the table.
Yeah, I'm going to go to the other side of the country here. USC D tackle Marlon.
Yeah, it's a great one.
Tui Pulutu, who was down at the Senior Bowl. This guy makes tons of plays out to the numbers, loves the hustle, sideline to sideline. And he doing that from the nose tackle one tech position most of the time. So he had really good tape in 2019 when he was paired with Jay Tufele. Tufele obviously opted out in 2020 and left Tui Pulutu by himself. But this guy has a great motor and I think a much better upside and projection than people think.
And by the way, Jay Tufele does not have a bad motor himself. He's another guy who'll chase plays outside the numbers.
There's certain teams where it's almost like infectious, and that's one of those where it seems like they kind of feed off each other.
No question. All right, let's go to our next one here. Guy that you are higher on than most, and I will start things off with Milton Williams from Louisiana Tech. I think I talked about him last week on the show. This is a guy who declared early for the draft, former defensive end who made the move as more of an interior player this year. He played in the 270s, I believe. Well, he's up over 290 now. He's going to test like a freak. He's really, really disruptive. He's violent with his hands. I think I wrote down in my notes, he reminded me of Malik Jackson when Malik was coming out of University of Tennessee. I think he's got that same kind of flexibility positionally where he can play DN, he can play D tackle. Either way, he's going to be really violent. He's going to be really disruptive, run game, pass game. Milton Williams, a guy I think is going to be a lot higher on boards than people right now are kind of giving him credit for. Ben, who would that pick be for you?
Well, we're going to go right back to USC and just talk fully about Jay Tufele right here. Another guy a little bit out of sight, out of mind. Really interesting college career because he was essentially just a one-year player. That 2019 was a bit of a rotational player. In 2018 was injured coming out of high school, didn't play his senior year, and then didn't play this past year. So whenever he's on the field, he's one of the best players. And it's easy to see. He has a really lethal combination of being powerful and balanced. He's a guy that can win with strength and, brute physicality. And he's so tough to knock off his feet, to move, to jar, to get him off his rush path, to get him out of his gap. He's a guy that can control his spot really well. He can play on the move really well. He has some plays in pursuit that are combine drills, where it's 2 steps to the left, redirecting back, flipping his hips. Doesn't always get the quarterback, but you can see the movement patterns. And I think really good player. Just another guy that opted out of 2020 and his draft buzz is a little bit kind of lost in the weeds right now with some of those other guys.
I think Tufele is a stud. I'm really excited about
And Fran, really quick with Tufele, I think he is incredibly raw still.
Yeah.
I think he still has some technique stuff to work on. I think he still has some awareness stuff, some block ID stuff.
Yep, definitely.
And that just makes what he's done on the field that much more impressive, that I think he's done it using some God-given abilities and just some athleticism and strength combination, and not necessarily being a technically sound football player, which gets me excited.
Yep.
That he still has some upside and some room to grow.
Dane, what do you got?
Let's stick at USC. I'm going with Tui Pulutu as the guy that I feel like I'm higher on than most. I mean, this is a guy that flashes power in his hands. He can shock. He can knock back. He can separate and find the ball carrier in the run game. Doesn't have a ton of backfield production, and I think he needs to get better as a pass rusher. But he's strong. He's stout. He's a dominant run defender. This is an NFL starter, 1-gap, 2-gap scheme. I'm a big fan of what he can do. He's in my opinion, a top 60 guy in this draft, no question.
So last week, when we finished up the segment, Ben texted me right afterwards. And he was like, "Hey, one category we need to put in every week is just a sleeper guy that no one's talking about that we need to bring up onto the show." And so here I am, following Ben's orders. Ben, you can lead us off here. Who's a sleeper at the D tackle spot?
Well, I've been watching some NAIA football lately, guys, and I'm just kidding. So 2 guys really quick. Big Naquan Jones at Michigan State is 6'4", 340. He's a massive run-plugging nose tackle with a little bit of upfield surge. He's an interesting player, not hard to miss at that size. And the other one at BYU is Kyra Tonga, number 95. He's about 6'4", 320. He's a wound-up defensive tackle with a really good get-off. You can see the athleticism and the burst. Doesn't always finish, but 2 guys, just a little bit, not much buzz around the draft circles right now.
I thought Tonga was a draftable player watching him. He's a fun player. I did like his film late in the week last week. Dane, who you got for us?
Yeah, he's definitely draftable, I think. I'm going with Roderick Perry. Defensive tackle out of Illinois. Throw in the Iowa tape, and you watch this guy get active, get after it. He's a grad transfer from South Carolina State, and so 1 year at the FBS level. There's a lot of tools there. I tell you what, I'll put money on him getting drafted in the 6th or 7th round. Like there's a lot of traits there to work with. He's got some length. He can drive blockers backwards. Plays with quickness. Plays with motor. Rod Perry, number 96, is a name to know.
I like that.
And that's a really popular transfer destination. I did have a note here in January. He decided to go back to Illinois for an extra year.
Interesting.
So he's definitely a player to keep an eye on, and somebody that has been on radars coming out of South Carolina State. And now
so he's going back for next year's.
Correct. Yeah, I see an article here from January 20th. But as we've seen before, there's been some okie dokes. There's been some back and forth. So this is kind of the land we're living in right now.
I can't keep track of all these.
Ben did that to me last week after I watched the North Texas kid on Friday. I watched the North Texas defensive tackle Norville, and I finished him up, and I talked to Ben, and he was like, "Oh yeah, he's going back." Like I feel like that's going to happen. They're like,
well, Twitter never ceases an opportunity to let me know either. I try to just mention Colby Harvell-Pell and a mix of nickel safeties, and a dozen people let me know that he's going back. Right. Not to mention he declared and then went back. So this is hard enough to figure out. And now you have players okey doke in their decisions. Yeah. Let's go, guys.
And technically they still have until March 1st to go back. So who knows? We might be talking about someone that, all right, well, I got to pick someone new then. I'm going to go with the big Kentucky nose tackle.
Here you go. Your boy.
Bohanna, number 95. I mean, this is, he was hurt a little bit, and you can tell when he wasn't in the game because their run defense was not nearly as effective. Massive dude. He anchors in the run game. He's not going to beat blockers with quickness. That's not his game. But you're looking for just a big, massive dude that can anchor. That's your guy. And so if you're looking for the right type of player, I think he's got a shot to get drafted.
There's a lot of Kentucky defenders to watch this year. There's 2 corners, I think a safety, an edge rusher, off-ball linebacker.
So the guy I had pegged is the same kind of body type as Quentin Bohanna. That's Tadaro Slayton from Florida, TJ Slayton, 6'5", 358. Now, 12 starts in the last 2 years, only 3.5 sacks. He's not a pass rusher. He's like Bohanna, but he's got power to push the pocket. He's strong. He's stout. Really strong run defender inside. This guy's really tough to move. Talking with some people that were on staff down there, they were expecting some first round buzz on him coming into the season. Obviously, he did not live up to that. Was not nearly as disruptive. But in terms of what his physical gifts are, people had some high hopes for him. And then just complete opposite body type, Carlo Kemp from Michigan, who's 6'3", 286. He played some D tackle, also played some DN late in the year. This is a high school running back like Aleem McNeil, really athletic, disruptive, has kind of that sub package D tackle, play profile. I feel like he's that kind of player moving forward into the NFL. Last round, guys, we're going to go with some player comps. Dane, I'll let you kick things off. I know how much you love player comps. Give us your best one here.
All right, so I'm stealing the guy that you're going to talk about.
Okay.
So we're going to have a couple different comps for this player.
All right.
Aleem McNeil, the player that just jumped out to me, just watching him was Javon Hargrave. Watching him up close and personal at East West Shrine practices coming out of South Carolina State. You just see the big bubble, the filled out body type, and they're just being surprisingly quick. Having that low center of gravity and being able to bend a little bit, it's still having that quickness to shoot gaps. I think that, Hargrave really surprised, and, McNeil, same type of thing. And so I think there's a lot of similarities between those two players.
I actually wrote down Dontari Poe while watching him. I thought that one just hit me over the head. Just a massive human being who is a true, we say this a lot. He is a true dancing bear. This guy's got really light feet. We talk about the former running back stuff, but he's got outstanding feet. He gets in and out really well. He can corner for a guy who's 340. The way that he's able to move at that size, I think is going to be like a Dontari Poe who, didn't he run like 4.7 or something like that when he was in the combine back in 2012? Dontari Poe and Aleem McNeil. And now, again, Poe ended up going top 15. I don't think McNeil's going to touch that, but just in terms of the skill set and the body type, I thought that was a very striking similarity. Ben, who's yours here? You can round us out.
Well, I guess I'll join the party with an Aleem McNeil comp for you guys here. So I'll go BJ Raji, who is a similar 6'1", 330 squatty guy with the light feet. Obviously you see the dancing panda stuff. And then the other guy, Tyler Sheldon, LSU nose tackle, reminds me a lot of the pieces of concrete from the old Veterans Stadium. The guy that he's just not going to move, not going to blow him off the ball. He's just a brick right in there. So
similar pass rush skills.
No question. Just kind of line of scrimmage dweller. When you put that piece of concrete out there, you know what you're getting. Same thing with Sheldon,
One thing stands out to me, guys, just looking through the list of D tackles. One name we did not mention in any of these categories. Anybody want to guess? There's a big one that it did not draft.
The Iowa kid, Nixon.
Yeah, we did not mention Davion Nixon at all. Any thoughts on that?
He's a really good athlete. You see the basketball profile, the basketball background, a flash player. I never really bought into the first round hype. I didn't think he was that type of player, but there's a lot of ability there, and he was obviously productive. So, he's interesting for sure. I think he's got a good chance of going top 50, but I'm not sure quite what to do with him.
I don't love his down-to-down play. I think his pass rush upside is really exciting. And when you watch his early career at Iowa, they were excited about it. He only played some sub packages. He played some third down roles last year for Iowa. They'll have him standing up and kind of these exotic pressure looks. So you can definitely tell the type of player he is. But in 2020, even when he had better production, I didn't love his down-to-down play. I feel like his flashes really outweighed his kind of collective body of work.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting that, we're talking about the top D tackles. We had like 7-8 categories. Each of us hit at least one player in each category, and his name did not come up once. We've talked about a bunch of guys. We're going to talk about a couple more now. Let's go on the clock. It's going to be a fun segment here.
On the clock.
All right, so this week for On the Clock, we're once again going to go with that same spin that we had last week, where each of us are going to play general manager, and while one of us is playing GM, one of us will play the scouting staff, the other will play the coaching staff, and then the GM will make the pick here at the end. These are all selections by random draw. So, Dane, you'll kick us off. You've got outside receiver for the Houston Texans in round 3. So a team that does not have much draft capital. I'm not even sure if they have a third round pick, to be quite honest with you, but we'll say that they have a third round pick. Houston Texans outside receiver. So you, Dane, as the general manager, as Nick Casario, what are you looking for in terms of what this team needs and typically goes for?
All right. So I believe the third round is the earliest we pick. All right. So I'm Nick Casario. All right, guys, put your phones down. Stop refreshing your Twitter. We're not trading Deshaun Watson. So let's talk about what's going to help our quarterback. And that's going to be an outside wide receiver, a target. And, we don't pick in the first 2 rounds. So, this is, thanks to my predecessor, appreciate that. So we need a guy on the outside who's got size, speed, playmaking skills. It could be a traditional X or maybe a speedy Z. Let's keep an open mind there. But let's get a playmaker for Deshaun and someone that's going to help our offense.
All right, we're picking up towards the top of round 3. All right, so I am going to play the role of the scouting staff here. And just from a player identification standpoint here, Dane, I'm going to look at some interesting names here. Number one, Tylan Wallace would be a name that I feel like has certainly made plays on the outside, maybe more of an interior guy, more of a slot presence in terms of what we're looking at projecting forward to the NFL. But a couple other names I want to throw at you. Number one, Austin Watkins, UAB. This is a guy that has that profile of a player that can line up at X, get off the jam, and make plays at all 3 levels of the field. We saw him do it down at the Senior Bowl. He did it at a high level down there, had a really solid week of practice. I would say Josh Palmer from Tennessee, similar kind of profile in terms of big, long, rangy. His best football could be ahead of him. Longtime starter in the SEC, was consistently productive despite the fact that the quarterback play wasn't great. And then Trevon Grimes. So 3 players from the Senior Bowl. Grimes, big, long, prototype at the X receiver spot. Wasn't the top target in that passing game, but we feel his most productive football could be ahead of him. So 3 names to consider there for you, Dane. Austin Watkins, Josh Palmer, Trevon Grimes, all 3 from the Senior Bowl. So with that being said, Ben, looking at this coaching staff and knowing what they're looking for offensively, who do you feel are some options in your mind?
Well, there's going to be some continuity as new coach David Culley is going to retain the offensive coordinator, Tim Kelly, I believe his name is. So there's going to be some continuity with the offense. So looking at who we have to deploy at the receiver room, Fran and Dane, we still have Brandon Cooks under contract. We have Randall Cobb in there. We've obviously lost Will Fuller. His contract is up. We got rid of Stills last year. DeAndre Hopkins gone as well. I think we need some size in combination with the speed, maybe a catch radius guy, maybe a red zone guy, somebody to obviously help Deshaun Watson and be more of a QB's best friend on the outside, maybe not making him have to be as accurate and as pinpoint, someone that can make a play for him. And our red zone production just struggled last year. Kiki Kuti led the team with 3 touchdowns in the red zone. The year before was Darren Fells. So I'm looking at maybe somebody with a little more length, a little more size in this round 3 ballpark. I have some names on my desk here, like a Terrace Marshall or a Sage Surratt, or maybe even a Tamorian Terry. These are all guys that can run pretty well with some more length to them, more in that kind of 6'3", 6'4" body of work that I think is a better complement to the Brandon Cooks, Randall Cobb type of guy that we already have on the roster here, Fran.
All right, so Dane, go take us through it.
Tell him, do you think Terrace Marshall will be available for us? Remember, it's an early 3rd round pick. Do you think that's a possibility?
I do think that's a possibility. There's some buzz out there that he could go round 1. This is a guy that, there's a limited sample size. He was injured for a chunk of 2019. He opted out early here in 2020. So, he's a guy that when you look at the numbers at the receiver spot, I could see a situation where he's there early round 3 for us.
Okay. I think that's the pick. I think Terrace Marshall, we talk about size. He has that. He's a vertical player. He can win down the field. He could be a guy that we groom. He's talented now, but he's also not near a ceiling. There's a lot of ways he can get better. So I like that Marshall pick. He might be just, ding just enough where he's going to fall out of the 2nd round and right into our laps in the 3rd.
All right, so let's go with our next one here. This is going to be Ben, who is going to be the general manager of the San Francisco 49ers. So you're going to play some John Lynch here, Ben. We need a safety on early day 3. So we're talking round 4, round 5. Ben, outline for us what you're looking for here as John Lynch for the 49ers at safety.
Again, we're going to have a new defensive coordinator here, but there's going to be continuity with D'Amico Ryans being promoted. So I'm expecting a similar scheme here. But we're going to have to really replace Jaquiski Tartt, who is a big safety for us with some good length, about 6'2", 220. So I want some size. I need the range, some length, and some toughness, as he was often our box safety. But we've transitioned a little bit away the single high cover 3 stuff last year, a lot more quarters base. So both these safeties have to be able to come downhill to play the run, defend in the middle of the field there. So that's the type of player in the mold that I'm kind of looking for. We still have Jimmy Ward under contract, but Jaquiski Tartt is probably going to leave us in free agency here. So that's the mold I'm trying to replicate.
All right. So, Dane, you are playing the role of the scouts here. Who are some safeties that you identify for early day 3 at safety?
Okay, well, I think that there's some safeties in this class that, fit that, guys that could be a little bit interchangeable, different body sizes. I'm going to give you 2 of them that maybe stood out to me. First one being Jamar Johnson from Indiana, a guy that's fluid. He can move really well. He's a guy that has the range that we're looking for. And I think he would be a great fit. If we're looking for a player that has more of the size that you mentioned, then Divine Diablo sticks out as maybe being that fit on day 3. A guy that's filled out, 6'3", 225, almost looks like a linebacker, but he's a former wide receiver. And so he's got some route recognition. He has the reactive athleticism where he can fill up the stat sheet. So, maybe he's better as in a robber scheme, but he's a guy that might be a fit for us as well.
So I will play the role of the coaching staff here. And as you mentioned, Ben, D'Amico Ryans, former Eagle, is now the defensive coordinator out there in San Francisco. So I'm expecting some schematic, carryover here. I'm looking at who are some safeties that fit this role. And I think, you look at Divine Diablo, he certainly kind of has that. I'm going to go with another guy here that's right in our backyard, Ben. And I know you're playing John Lynch. That's a Stanford guy. It would pain you to take a player from USC. But I think if we're going to play a little bit more split safety and we're looking for a guy that's going to come down and play closer to the line of scrimmage, we could do worse than Talanoa Huffanga from USC. This is a guy that has that play personality that we're looking for, that kind of infectious personality that that we like, that we have that we have searched out for defensively for years and years under Kyle Shanahan, under John Lynch. But then also, look, I know he's got a little bit of a medical worry. We've taken some chances on guys that have had those medical red flags in the past. We took Tim Harris out of Virginia. We took Julian Taylor out of Temple. We took Javon Kinlaw in the first round last year. There were some concerns with his shoulder that are kind of similar to Huffanga. So I think when you're looking at a scheme fit, I think he fits what we're looking for. But then also from a personality fit, I think he really could kind of mesh well with what we're building defensively.
So, Fran, let me ask you, if you're trying to stack here, Divine Diablo, I love Huffanga. One other name I'm going to maybe throw into this mix is a Jacoby Stevens as an early day 3, where we just stack Stevens in comparison to a Diablo and your player.
I'll tell you what, I would take Jacoby Stevens, and I would probably feel pretty good about that. And he would be a name that if he's there for us in early day 3, I might like him a little bit more at linebacker. But if we're going to play split safety, he's lost a little bit of weight. He came in at the Senior Bowl lighter than we expected. So he's obviously embracing that, the ability to stick at safety. If we want to go Jacoby Stevens, me as the coaching staff, I'm not going to be upset by that selection.
Yeah, I think I'm going to stick with a Divine Diablo role.
Yep.
He's a guy that can play some dime linebacker, has some really good instincts being that former safety, whether it's in some matchup roles or maybe some zone roles as well. A guy that can route the middle. But at the end of the day, just love his size, speed, athleticism combination at 6'3", nearly 225 pounds.
All right, so I will take over the Minnesota Vikings here. I will be Rick Spielman, and we are looking for a nose tackle in round 2. And so what I'm looking for here, consider this, all right? Shamar Stephen, the defensive tackle, he's entering a contract year. We went out and signed Michael Pierce last offseason after we lost Linval Joseph, but he opted out due to COVID-19 concerns this past fall. So we did have a hole there, but we are expecting Michael Pierce back. That being said, he has an out after this first year of the contract. We can get out of that if we wanted to, and we do owe him a lot of money afterwards. So if I'm looking for someone stout, I'm looking for someone big, physical. Pass rush is a plus, but it's not a prerequisite. Remember, we had Linval Joseph in there for a long time. We signed Michael Pierce for a reason. We like those kinds of players. So with that in mind, is there a guy for us here in round 2 that would fit this scheme? Ben, you are the scout. I will come to you here.
And while it's an even front scheme under Mike Zimmer in a single gap scheme, that one tech nose tackle is still going to have to plug. It's still going to have to be able to hold up against double teams when it presents. So I'm going to need someone that's strong and brute strength, but I would like somebody with a little more lateral athleticism than a true nose tackle. So while we may be looking at a Quinton Bohanna or a Tyler Sheldon, I think they're much more suited to be in a 2-gapping odd front scheme. So I'm going to maybe roll the dice with a J2 Fele at 6'3", 310 of being a 1-tech at the next level. It's somebody with that I think is a little more 1-tech, 3-tech versatile, or a Tommy Togiak. who has played a lot of no shade one tech for Ohio State and some big time games, can hold up double teams, really technically sound player. Maybe both a little bit lighter than the profile we've taken in the past, with obviously going after Michael Pierce in free agency and guys like Linval Joseph in the past here. But I think Tufele and Togiak present the strength at the point and the light feet and lateral agility to make some more plays.
Dane, who do you got for us here as the coaching staff?
Well, as you know, the key piece of this defense is a stout nose. We want to build that strong spine up the middle, and it starts with that nose tackle. We need to go with size. That you look at, Steven, he's 6'5". You look at Pierce, 340 plus. So I don't know how easy it's going to be to find a guy with that type of size with what we're looking for. So maybe we do need to think outside the box. So I think, there's two ways that we could attack this. We can go with the guy with size, and that's Tyler Sheldon. Has the size. I don't know that he has the movements, but he has the size and the power. Or we could maybe go outside the box a little bit and go with a guy that has power and has a little bit of that lateral agility, like a Togiak. So I think there's two ways to do it. We could do it like we've always gone and go the Tyler Sheldon route, or are we ready to maybe expand a little bit and go with the Togiak? So I think those are the best options as we try to strengthen that spine of our defense.
Well, guys, I was on the treadmill last week and I was listening to this great podcast, the Journey to the Draft podcast, and they had a segment called The Blueprint where Arif Hassan, who does a great job covering the Minnesota Vikings for The Athletic, jumped on and he said, we are so analytically driven. And you know what? I was thinking to myself, yeah, he's really right. We're always looking for guys that match the numbers, either from a production standpoint or from an athleticism standpoint. So I want to ask you, do either of you guys feel that an Aleem McNeil from NC State, would he fit what we're looking for? Because this guy's a big human being and he's going to test really, really well. And I feel like that's something that would kind of cater to us. Do we feel that he's a guy that could play that role for us?
I think he could play that role for us. My question is, in round 2, if that's the right ballpark for an Aleem McNeil type of prospect. So we certainly have some other needs to address. We can look at our board and see who maybe the best available is, as opposed to reaching for a positional need here. I think we all like Aleem McNeil, but whether this round 2 value is warranted, I think is going to be the big conversation.
Yeah, I'm a coach. I don't know about the rounds and all that, but I do think McNeil is maybe a mix of those two. Tyler Sheldon's the guy that's not going to move, but he's powerful. Togiak is on the other side. McNeil maybe a little bit in the middle, where he's got some movements, he's got size. He could probably be 340 and still move really well. He's about 325 now. So McNeil would be an interesting one. I don't know about the positional value in the second round. But I do think McNeil could fit with what we're looking for.
And really quick, Fran and Dane, let me just put a scenario out here as I'm kind of envisioning there not being an interior defensive tackle going off the board day 1. So if we have the full interior defensive tackle list of prospects available to us, would you guys want to be aggressive in going and maybe getting a Barmore with that 33rd overall pick and going and getting one of those guys that maybe have higher value?
I would say that, and I'm looking back to look, just get
it's going to take some draft capital.
History.
We're probably going to have to trade maybe a 3rd round or a 4th round to move up in the 2nd round here. But if we're looking at a Davion Nixon or a Barmore sitting there available on day 2, are we one of those darlings of day 2 getting on the phone, making sure we get our guy?
We've been a big trade down operation over the course of the last few years. We like the idea of having more darts to throw, but could this be a situation where we would break that mold? I think there'd be some interest there. I think there would certainly be some interest there. Just looking at the players that are available, though, the guys that you had brought up, the guys that we've discussed, I'm going to go a little bit off the ball. I'm going to go with Aleem McNeil. And I feel like, it might be a round too early. It might be 2 rounds too early. But I think he fits what we're looking for from a schematic standpoint, from an athletic standpoint. And, hey, I'm the general manager. I'm going to pick the player that I want. That happens sometimes. Guys, this was a good segment. I hope you guys all enjoyed that. We'll continue to do this every single week leading up to the NFL draft. Ben, Dane, we will talk to you guys in the next show.
All 32 teams are always under construction. How are they being built? Let's check out the blueprint.
All right, I'm excited to join here this week on the Blueprint on the Journey to the Draft podcast by Zach Hicks, who does a great job covering the Indianapolis Colts for SB Nation. He's written some awesome pieces about the draft strategy and some of the trends behind Chris Ballard and his time so far in Indianapolis. And that is right up the alley of what this segment is all about. So I'm excited to welcome Zach here to the show. Zach, thanks for joining me, man.
Yeah, of course, man. When you reached out, I couldn't say yes fast enough. I swear I've been watching your stuff. Even though I grew up a Washington fan, I was watching your stuff with the Eagles for so long. So it's a blast to be here, man.
Oh, I appreciate that, man. So let's get to talking about this Colts team and Chris Ballard. Widely respected in terms, from a media standpoint and from a football standpoint in terms of how he has gone about building this Colts team, and has only been the general manager for a handful of years. But it seems like there's been a little bit of an identity built around this team on both sides of the football. So if we can kind of go one by one. What are three trends that kind of stand out to you, watching this team closely and studying everything that they do in terms of their draft history under Chris Ballard, and maybe some tips for some people as they're building a mock draft? What would be the first thing that comes to mind?
Yeah, the first one by far and away, one trend that we've really seen over the years is look at those senior players and especially those Senior Bowl guys. Going all the way back to even 2017, and also that big draft in 2018 he had where he had Quentin Nelson, all them. After Quentin Nelson, you got Darius Leonard, who was at the Senior Bowl. Yep. You got Tyquan Lewis, Kamoko Toure. I believe, I don't know if Jordan Wilkins, Naeem Hines, I think one of them was there. Both of them were there as well.
Naeem Hines, I'm pretty sure was, yep.
Yeah, Hines. And then even these past years, Michael Pittman Jr. was there, Ben Bandicoot, Rock Ya-Sin. All these guys are Senior Bowl guys, and Chris Ballard loves that aspect of the draft. He loves getting senior guys. Obviously he'll spend some top picks on guys who are underclassmen like Quentin Nelson and I believe Jonathan Taylor last year as well. Yep. But he likes those senior guys, and that's always something I circle. Senior Bowl is big for him. And then, if we want to jump to the second one here, high character guys too. Right. Loves high character guys. It's a big part of the process. I don't know how many people know this outside of Indy, but Brian Decker is their player personnel director for the Colts. Right. And he's a former Green Beret who vets these players like at the Senior Bowl, at the Combine, and vets them on character. And they don't draft a player unless they get the sign off from Brian Decker. So senior guys and high character, like if you see a big red flag off the field, I would not mock them to the Colts.
Yeah, it's there was an interesting piece. I want to say, was it MMQB that ran the piece where it was all about about Brian Decker and the process, all the different questions that he asked. I think it was a series of 5 questions, and it was a really cool piece that they really kind of peeled back the curtain into their process. They've actually been very open in terms of looking at their process, which has been fun for us on the outside. It's interesting too. I know that Chris has talked about this in press conferences in the past, that it's like they're trying to get the mental makeup, and they're not necessarily scared about a guy if he's made one mistake or he's had kind of one miss up. And that goes back to his days when he was a coach at like Texas A&M Kingsville. It's like, hey, I've been around good guys that have made bad decisions. He said, I want to find out what are these guys that have the makeup that we're looking for. I think it's a really interesting look at the entire process for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, just from covering this team, I covered Washington for a couple of years. Then I came over to cover the Colts, and you can definitely see what the type of guys he's brought in. Yep. The high character. I mean, Kari Willis, I talked to him right before that draft class in 2019, and right away knew that he was a Ballard type of guy. And luckily he ended up being there. Naeem Hines is another way where it's just, these guys are like, just have that so much maturity, and they kind of understand like who they are, what like what they're ready to get better. So you can kind of see that same exact vibe from everybody. Obviously it's taken to some different levels. Darius Leonard has that, but he's legitimately insane on top of it. So, you kind of have different levels of it, but the maturity and that character aspect, you can kind of tell just within the first few minutes of talking to a guy, if they're a type of Ballard, like Chris Ballard type.
All right, let's get to the third one. What's the third takeaway?
It's going to be the explosion and speed. He loves those high upside guys, and he's been lucky to hit on a lot of them. He's also, he's missed on a few. Kamoko Toure and Ben Bandicoot haven't really panned out the way that we would have hoped for. But when you look at some of the other guys, I mean, you got Darius Leonard, Braden Smith, Michael Pittman Jr., Jonathan Taylor. Like, those guys are high octane, explosive athletes. And he likes to take those shots. And I think it kind of goes back to the character thing too. It's when they get that good feel for the character and good feel for their mental makeup, then he feels confident taking those guys with those high upsides. But That's the Chris Ballard way. He'll take a couple of guys who are like higher floor guys, like your Kari Willis types, but he loves to have that explosive element to his team. And we've seen that in the draft the last couple of years.
I know that he has said that in the past in interviews. I think he went on Move the Sticks with Daniel Jeremiah and was like, look, like we've got an indoor stadium. We want to get fast guys on the track here in Indy. And you kind of see that with the way that they build the team. And then really from position to position, they take a lot of guys with high end speed. With that in mind, are there any kind of schools or different programs, or whether it's Chris Ballard or this coaching staff, that you feel kind of have special connections that people need to keep in mind when they're putting together their mock draft?
Well, Colts fans would hate it if I said it, but he does like his guys from Ohio State. Now, unfortunately, they haven't panned out exactly. Tyquan Lewis had a good bounce back year this year. Paris Campbell, we're trying to get him on the field, but he does like Ohio State, but he likes the Big Ten in general. It seems like he likes to take a lot of guys from the Big Ten. Like I said, Kamoko Ture is from the Big Ten. Jonathan Taylor from the Big Ten last year.
He's a Wisconsin guy.
And he's a Wisconsin guy. Yep. So he does like the Big Ten. He actually seems to take that around the same percentage as the SEC, where the rest of the league, it's probably higher SEC than anybody else. Right. So I would definitely look at Big Ten and Ohio State type players, but he doesn't really, it's not something like he particularly looks just at Big Ten, but I think he has a bit of a connection to those schools over there.
Sure, that makes sense. Let's get to the next question here in terms of the needs for this football team. And obviously, there are plenty of media reports that say that the Colts have their quarterback now moving forward. But outside of that position, what would you say are the three biggest needs right now for this team moving into the fall?
Yeah, so obviously free agency can change a lot of this. With I believe they have $48 million in cap space still. Right. Not too many big time free agents of their own to sign. I mean, T.Y. Hilton, Xavier Rhodes could take some of that, but as of right now, I would say the biggest need, and some people might disagree with me, but I think it's that defensive end or edge rusher is the biggest thing for them right now. They just kind of lack that consistency off the edge all year. Justin Houston was solid, but just wasn't consistently getting pressure. So defensive end, number one. Then left tackle would probably come in at number two. Anthony Castanzo retired this past off season. They didn't really have too much of a replacement for him on the roster, so they're going to have to get a new guy in there. And then I'd probably go with corner after that. Rocky Sin kind of took a bit of a step back. Xavier Rhodes might be gone in free agency, so they could probably use another younger corner in this cornerback group.
And for those that have not seen it, the piece that really kind of said like, oh, I need to get Zach on the show. Zach, you just did a piece about what Chris Ballard looks for in edge rushers and went through a whole bunch of different metrics and, prototypes and things of that nature. It's a series that you've been working on over the last couple of years. So I implore you guys, go check that piece out in terms of that number one need for this Colts team. When we talk about need, I always ask everybody now, when you talk about the difference between need versus best player available, where do you feel that Chris Ballard lands on that? And how do you feel that will be addressed here in this upcoming draft?
Yeah, I think like all good things, it's the answer lies in the middle. I won't think that, like you said, the reports out there that they have their quarterback. I don't think they're going to just say like, oh, if a great quarterback's there, they'll take the great quarterback. I think that it kind of just goes in the middle there. Like, who's the best player at a spot that we can still use them? You're not going to take a guard when you have Quentin Nelson and Mark Lewinsky and all those guys up front. But I do think it kind of comes, it's like a push-pull with that. Like last year with Jonathan Taylor, they traded up and grabbed a guy when they really didn't need a running back, when they had Marlon Mack and Nyheim Hines already on the roster, already good players. So Ballard likes to have those shots. He likes to take those shots on high talented players, but there needs to be somewhat of a need there, or at least something in the future coming up where it makes sense to take that best player.
All right, let's talk about some of the players in this class. Is there a guy or two, and with the Colts picking, in the low 20s, there's a wide variety of players that have been linked to them. Is there a guy that you're like, man, like, okay, knowing what we know about Chris Ballard, about Frank Reich, these couple guys make a lot of sense based off some of these things that you've laid out?
Yeah, I think if you're talking first round, I think a guy like J.C. Horn makes a lot of sense. Just has the size, the height, the size, the strength, the willingness to tackle, which is big in this scheme, and also has that mindset where you can just say like, this guy has the feel of like a number one corner in this league. I always love that in corners, and he definitely has that. I think when you get past the first round, I think one guy who makes perfect sense, just speaking about defensive ends here too, is Jordan Smith out of UAB. Super big, super long, athletic, explosive guy. I mean, he's a little bit raw, but I think he fits everything. And then pretty much any of these tackles. I mean, all these tackles, it's a great class. I really like the athleticism at the top of this class. So as long as you have a guy who has some decent size, probably around 300, 310, decent arm length and stuff, but is really, really explosive and athletic, a tackle in the first round makes a lot of sense there.
And then I guess off of that, is there a guy or two that's being mocked to the Colts that you just I just don't think that this match makes a lot of sense in your mind?
Pretty much anyone at 21. Knowing Chris Ballard, I mean, the trade back probably seems like the most likely thing. The only guy that really comes to mind is the Georgia pass rusher, Azeez Ujulari, I think his name. Yeah, super young, really fun player. But I feel like, and this is, again, part of this has to go off of my own evaluation.
Sure.
I think he's kind of got shorter arms and he's more of like a polished rusher than he is an explosive and long athlete, which is what Ballard typically likes. So that one hasn't made a ton of sense to me, but outside of that, man, anyone at 21, I feel like that's almost a guaranteed trade back with them losing their 3rd round pick reportedly.
Interesting. All right, well, let's get to the final question. That's any final parting advice you've got for people that are making their mock draft and they're picking for the Colts at 21?
You'll probably be wrong. I feel like I've been able to, I've been told that my Build a Ballard series, which by the way is one of probably the most creative thing I'll ever be able to name. I probably will. That's probably it. But I feel like I've been able to narrow on some of the aspects he likes. But Chris Ballard always seems to take a player that I don't expect, and I'm always even a little bit baffled. And then they turn into an all-pro. So, I mean, he knows what he's doing. He's great at it. I've been able to circle on some of them, but I would say just focus on those Senior Bowl types, those high character guys. And that's hard to say without really interviewing guys, but do the best you can with that. But check out, definitely keep an eye on that Senior Bowl. That's what he loves.
Love it. Well, Zach, really appreciate you joining us here on the Journey to the Draft podcast. Really hope to see more of these Building the Ballard series because I've been enjoying all of them. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Thanks, buddy.
Now it's time to hear from you, the fans, in the Draft Mailbag.
Well, great stuff there from Zach. Really insightful. And I'm always going to be on the lookout for people that are putting together those kinds of pieces to bring them on here to the show. That was really good stuff there from Zach. Let's wrap this one up with our draft mailbag. And we've got a mock draft from Sugarcane 590, who left a 5-star review and said he did a mock draft on the Draft Network and their mock draft machine. What do you think of this 7-round Eagles-only mock draft? And so with the 7th overall pick here, the Sugarcane did a trade back with the Lions and picked up an extra 2nd-round selection. He picked Alabama corner Patrick Surtain Jr. I love Patrick Surtain. He's one of my favorite players in this draft. And to get him in a trade back, I think that would be awesome. The Eagles stayed put and took him. I think that'd be awesome too. He's a really fun player. I think he'd be a great fit in this scheme and certainly fits an area of need as the Eagles will try and see if they can continue to bolster that cornerback position. 37 overall, linebacker Baron Browning from Ohio State. And Baron Browning, very versatile player. Really, this was his only year as a starter, quote unquote, but has played a ton of snaps over the course of his career, and he can do a lot of different things. He showed off that versatility down at the Senior Bowl. He could play in the line of scrimmage. He could play over the tight end and drop back in coverage. He could play in a stacked position and attack downhill, and he can rush the passer a little bit as well, put his hand in the dirt and get after the quarterback. And I think that versatile skill set will serve him very well, depending on the scheme he goes into in the NFL. But this is a big physical kid. He's got some athleticism to him. He's a really versatile player that people should not forget about moving into this draft. Next up, with that 2nd-round pick that he acquired in the trade back, Sugar Cane took Wake Forest pass rusher Carlos Boogie Basham, who is a power player off the edge. He could slide inside. He was right around 280 at the Senior Bowl, but he wins with power. He wins with technique. More importantly, he wins with effort. And we're going to talk about players of that ilk, actually, this week on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, myself and Ben. We're going to be talking all about the top sack artists in the NFL this past year after some film study. And Basham, this is a guy that I feel like can have that kind of disruptive potential. I know Ben actually tweeted, he said he felt he would be able to lead the league in pressures as a rookie. In terms of the rookie pass rushers, he'd be one of the most disruptive in year one, and I think that's spot on. I think Basham has that kind of skill set. To get him mid-round 2 would be good value there. Let's go to round 3, another Senior Bowl player, this time with Dwayne Eskridge, the wide receiver from Western Michigan. Explosive athlete. I think some similarities to a Terry McLaurin when he was coming out of Ohio State. He's a little bit older. He'll be a 24-year-old rookie, but explosive, really, really fun athlete who's also got some savvy at the top of routes as well. He had a really good week of practice down at the Senior Bowl. Let's get to day 3 here, and then we'll kind of speed through this. We got a couple additions to the secondary. Another Senior Bowl player in Damar Hamlin, a versatile safety who played down in the nickel a little bit, out for Pitt. Kind of similar to Avonte Maddox, a former teammate of his, but Hamlin is a fun player. I've studied him for a couple of years now. At 167, Oregon corner, Diablo Lenore. I think he's got a starting skill set. He's not a impressive off the hoof athlete that's going to wow you in terms of the way he moves, but I think he's got some instincts to him, and I think he's got some competitiveness to him that you like. Let's go to the next couple of picks here. Anthony Schwartz, the wide receiver from Auburn. This guy is speed, and more speed. He's fluid in and out of breaks as well. Not super productive over the course of his career, but a world-class sprinter, an outstanding track athlete. That speed translates to the football field. So a little bit of a project still, but this guy has got some juice to be certain. Let's go to the next one. Robert Hainsey, an offensive lineman from Notre Dame, another Senior Bowl player. This guy was a right tackle by trade for the Irish. Then he played guard, both guard spots, and some center during the week in Mobile. I'll tell you what, he looked one of the best offensive linemen by my eyes down there at the Senior Bowl. I thought he had a really good week. I think he's got starting potential, especially on the inside. I thought he was more of a swing tackle, just going off of film. There are going to be some length limitations there. He's not the most fleet of foot, but I think when you put him on the inside, I think that he's got some real ability. I think he's going to be a starter. Even at center, I think he's got some ability there. Getting him mid to late day 3 would be a steal. I think he's got the ability to go even earlier than that. Let's go to the last couple. These guys were Senior Bowl players as well. So a very Senior Bowl heavy mock draft here from Sugar Cane. Patty Fisher from Northwestern, kind of your classic thumper, oversized middle linebacker. He's been playing up at Northwestern for a handful of years now. And then Chris Evans, he's been at Michigan for a while, missed a year, all right, because of an academic thing. He had to kind of, he wasn't in school, was not with the program for a full year, came back this year, and was kind of a part-time player. But he has shown some talent. He's shown some flashes. So Chris Evans rounding out the draft. So that's a good mock from Sugar Cane. Like I said, heavy with Senior Bowl players. I mean, you look at Baron Browning, Basham, Eskridge, Hamlin, Hainsey, Fisher, Evans. That's 7 Senior Bowl players. That's a lot of guys coming off the board there for Sugar Cane. So really appreciate you guys leaving those comments, leaving those ratings, leaving all of that stuff, all of your support over at our Apple Podcast page. Thanks so much to everybody that has done, though, in recent weeks. We're going to keep this going here. In a couple days, we've got a great show for you here. Greg Cosell will be back. We'll have another special guest. We'll have Ben Fennell. We'll be breaking it all down later this week right here on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA.
In just over 3 years, Eagles Autism Foundation has raised millions of dollars for autism research and care. But this is about so much more than just fundraising. This is about making a transformational difference in the lives of those affected by autism. This is about bringing our community together. With inclusive, sensory-friendly events and accessible resources, we meet families where they need us most and where we can serve them best. Together, we're united in our mission to improve the lives of the autism community and to turn awareness into action. It's what we focus on every day in every way.